Everybody, this is Gaynor Milky, owner of Charisma Inc., and this is the Moving the Needle YouTube series. And I'll introduce John Higgins, who's my co-host here. Hey, John.
Hello, Gaynor. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again here today.
Yeah. So, Moving the Needle is our YouTube series where we're demystifying and breaking down technology and trends and tools to help you really make a difference and move the needle in your firm. And our deep dive in the second episode is on generative AI tools. And in our first episode, we talked about the big picture of AI, and we chose to kind of jumpstart this YouTube series with AI just because it's such a hot topic, but with the intention of giving you, the audience, an idea of exactly how you can use it in an accounting firm, as opposed to just keep hearing the term and kind of reading high level articles about it. John is an expert in you know, generative AI in accounting firms because he's been following it since the beginning and is also educating hundreds of accountants every week probably with all of the speaking that you do on these topics. And I bring to it a perspective of an actual working accounting firm kind of insights, because we work with a lot of firms and we see them going through the struggle of understanding how these tools can actually be applied. So with that, I think that's really a great segue into John maybe sharing a little bit about, first off, what is generative AI through the lens of an accounting profession, and then what tools are available and how would you use them? So that's really three questions, and I know they're all pretty big. So let's break it down to the first one, which is, what is generative AI?
Yeah, great. So let me take a stab at that. Gaynor and I have kind of laid out an agenda for these chats so that we can, really have a gateway or pathway for you all to, building block development of your knowledge of AI. So with that, I thought it'd be a good place to start before we jump right into the generative AI specifically, is just talk about the field of AI overall. And so I have a slide I want to bring up here that's I pulled this actually from IBM's website, and it's very good. I kind of put it in my own words here, but hopefully you can all see that. Can you see that now, Gaynor?
Yep, I can.
So to kind of help you understand where generative AI fits into the world of artificial intelligence, that understand there are like three main categories or buckets of AI technology. And they're really, it's kind of interesting because it's such sophisticated technology, but the people that are experts in the field have given it very basic names for each of the buckets. Narrow AI, also known as weak AI, general AI, also known as strong AI, and super AI, also known as artificial super intelligence. And you'll see I've highlighted that the first important point is to understand that narrow AI is the only form of artificial intelligence technology that actually exists today. And that would be your generative AI. It would be your chatbots. It would be ChatGPT, Alexa, Cortana, Siri, right? So it's kind of interesting because we think that generative AI really started in the world on November 30th, 2022, when ChatGPT was released. But really, Cortana, Siri, and Alexa, those types of apps, those are generative AI. And so we've been using them for a while. Now, I know some people are really not that comfortable with those tools. Like Alexa is a classic example. I know some folks who won't even allow it in their house because they don't want it listening to them. I'm the opposite. I have an Echo Dot on the bedstand next to my bed, and every morning I get up and I say, Alexa, what's the weather today? And she gives me a nice, quick recap of the weather. And then I also have Alexa connected to my Outlook calendar. So I say, Alexa, what's on my calendar today? And then, she'll read that off, and then I can decide if I can roll over and sleep for another half hour or not. ChatGPT is the one that's really gotten most of the press because it was the first to the marketplace. But you have Google Gemini, you have Meta's Llama, you have Anthropic, you have XAI from part of Elon Musk's group of companies. So there's quite a few out there to choose from, and we'll get into the those different applications down the road in our series here. Now, general AI is kind of when it starts to get a little bit concerning, right? This is like, okay, is this going to be for the better of humanity, or is it going to be detrimental to humanity? But when you hear the term general AI, and what you'll actually hear quite often is AGI, which is
Mhm.
funny because as accountants, we would think AGI is adjusted gross income, right?
Right.
But it's artificial general intelligence. And it still today exists in theory only, but basically probably the most important bullet point there, it's intellectually on par with humans,
Mhm.
right? So that you have these applications which will be able to do things to create their own information on par or maybe even better than what we can do as humans, because for better or for worse, they don't have emotion. The application doesn't have emotion. Now, I would say that's for the worst because you need emotion. That's just a core part of life. But when we're talking about processing information, maybe in that case, sometimes it's better not to have emotion. Just look at the politics and the conversation on politics. There's more emotion than there is fact, for sure. Now, what's interesting about this general AI, artificial general intelligence, is before ChatGPT was released in 2022, the body of science, the experts in the field were predicting that we would get to the AGI level of AI in 40, 50, 60 years out. Okay, 5 years ago, they were saying it's going to be 40, 50, 60 years out before we get to the equivalent of AGI, artificial general intelligence. Once ChatGPT came on the scene, that was revised down to 5 years.
Wow.
So that's pretty compelling because now they've seen how generative AI has started to work its way into society and how society responded to it. And then on the other hand, you have just the core technology is advancing at very rapid level. Just look at what's happened with NVIDIA. NVIDIA makes all the chips. They're the primary maker of the chips that power all of these computer systems. And just to give it some perspective, Microsoft and OpenAI have a joint project called Stargate, where they're building a $100 billion computer system. One computer system. It'll have its
Wow.
own data center and it'll have the compute power that will allow it to be at the level of AGI. And that system, that $100 billion system, think about that. That's real money even for Microsoft. That's predicted to come online in about 5 years. So that's just future though. We don't need to get too excited or anxious about that, but we also need to understand and be aware these things are coming. And then you get to the artificial superintelligence. Now you look at the bullet points there: cognitive abilities surpassing human beings, understand human feelings and emotions, develop its own beliefs and desires. So that's like way out there, right? That's the sci-fi movies that you watched. And so we don't really need to worry about that because we could worry about that. But we'll let people like Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, and Elon Musk, and those folks, let them worry about it. That's for us today, particularly as CPAs running practices. How do we take advantage of this, generative AI model?
Hmm. Yeah. Let's we're gonna have some super accountants in 60 years. I'll not be around for that probably. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So yeah, so let's think about just I guess the strong generative AI. How could that exist only in theory, right? If I
Well,
go,
so generative AI, when we talk about weak AI, that's where generative AI comes into
that's
play.
where we are
That's
right
this,
now.
yeah. And
So,
so generative AI, just a little bit more insight into that. The reason I call it generative is because it generates content.
mhm.
And you'll hear the term multimodal. What does that mean? Well, it means that it can understand as input text, audio, video, images, right? I can upload an image to ChatGPT and say, what is this?
Yeah.
And it will tell me what it is. And then on the outbound side, the content that it generates, that's why they again call it generative AI, It can generate multimodal. It can generate text. It can generate audio, generate video, and generate images.
Hmm. So is that sort of like when I know like in Google you can put in an image and then it will basically search to find content that matches up with images?
Yes,
Mhm.
it gets into, and maybe we could talk at some point about machine learning and robotic
Yes.
process automation, where those all fit together. But it's really just a really advanced application of machine learning. So if you put an image up there and then ask it questions about that image, well,
Mhm.
it has that image in its large language model. In our next segment, we talked about we're going to take a deeper dive in how does a large language model, how does it work? That's a little technical too, but I think it's important, foundational information. So just, that's what we
So,
can be looking forward to talking about, that
so
large
what
language model.
pops into my head then with what you're saying is there the potential at some point to put a picture of a client tax return into, some application and then, the generative AI will do the tax planning for you?
You can do that today. You can do that
Okay.
today. Now, there's caveats, there's risk. We'll talk about that in some of our conversations going forward. We'll talk about the risks. But today, you could take a 1040 tax return for a client
Hmm.
and upload it. Now, there's things you want to do to anonymize it because we get into the whole client privacy, data privacy. It's very
Right.
important. Number one concern of CPAs is data privacy. And I totally understand that as a CPA for the last 40 years myself. I get it. So you got to understand how to use the tools. We can get into that down the road here, but yes, you could upload a 1040 tax return and say, give me 20 suggestions that I, as a CPA, can share with my client for
Hmm.
ways in which they can reduce their tax burden next year. I
Hmm.
would word it pretty much just like that. It's conversational. It's a chatbot, right? It's a conversational thing, and I think when you do it, you'll be amazed. You'll say, "Oh my gosh!" And within 2 minutes, I always say everything's within 2 minutes with this stuff because it feeds back, almost instantly, and it will come up with 20 recommendations. And I asked for 20 because I know I only want to use 10 because some of them are probably not going to be that useful or just too basic and so forth. So you can, ask it for more and just pull out what you think is the best. Very important to understand about this whole technology, Gainer, is that kind of the fear factor. You have to understand that this technology augments us as CPAs. It does not replace us.
Hmm.
So you do have to check your ego at the door a little bit because it's like, wow, that's really pretty good what it can come up with.
And we had talked about this a little bit off camera too, is just how do you broach this with clients? If clients are you full disclosure on, hey, we're using some AI to get to some of the recommendations, or it's just you're using it as research like you would with any like tax site or any kind of other tool that you may have used in the past. And then also if you have clients who are asking about what is your firm's usage of AI, how do you address that too? That's probably something that we'll talk about in depth a little bit more. But just from this example that we just, talked about with the tax return, uploading it, getting some ideas for advisory or tax planning, what is your thought on how firms should approach doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question, great point to discuss because the where was it going? I do a whole presentation on the ethical use of AI. And so the
Hmm.
question becomes is, all right, how transparent do we need to be? And then how do we go about, communicating that?
Hmm.
And the other point of it is that, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, Gaynor, the fact that, everybody's starting on an equal playing field here with this stuff. Although the playing fields, things are moving, the game's moving
Yeah,
at a pretty fast,
quickly.
fast clock. Um,
Not
but
baseball on a summer
yeah,
afternoon.
yeah, not like baseball. Um, so from a CPA perspective, we don't have the ethical guidelines, the standards in place yet of what we should do. So when I do my ethics presentation, I say, really, folks, we just have to rely on our core ethics, right? Because the standards aren't there yet. The legal regulations and stipulations are not there yet. Everybody's trying to figure this out together. So then you got to ask yourself, okay, um, do you tell folks now, are you transparent about when you use Google to do research? Probably not, right? If you need to cite somebody a citation, you would do that. Maybe like for a decision or some advice on a tax situation, you might cite the master tax guide or whatever tax research software you're using. But I don't have the answer. I don't know if anybody has the answer, because I always joke when I do my presentation now, because I use generative AI all the time. I always say that I'm going to just put on my title slide, generated by ChatGPT and me,
Yeah.
for the whole thing, right? Because I use it as it's my research assistant, and I don't disclose when I use information that was generated by my staff assistant, right? Because really the client just wants to know, John, are you giving me, valid information, and can I understand it and so forth? I don't think the clients really care where it came from, as long as they, know that they can trust you, the individual that's delivering that information. It's kind of my overall opinion on it.
So well, I have a couple of thoughts on that, just around, obviously with like our company, we do a lot of content development. We work with thought leaders. So we walk a, I actually walk a bright white line with AI, just because, when I believe when you're a thought leader, if you're a true thought leader, you should not be using Chat GPT to just like come up with ideas. I think they can be ideas that augment what your philosophies are or whatever your frameworks are. I think that's fine in doing the research. But there is also, if you're going to use generative AI to develop information like presentations, or if you're providing your clients with a tax guide or something like that, by law, you do have to disclose that it's coming from these sources, because it's a copyright issue. And I would also just say, and I'd be interested to get your take on this, John, these tools have, right now, as I understand it, finite databases of information, right? So it's not like it's everything that has ever been produced on a specific topic. So you're limited somewhat by how much information and how often you use these tools for them to get to know, how they should approach what you're asking them. So that's just something to keep in mind as well, is that, you know, I'm not sure, and you would have a better insight into this than I do, is every year, we have new tax guidelines, or we've got, new compliance that's coming into the accounting space. You know, how much are these kind of like mainstream generative tools, I guess, incorporating that into their knowledge base that you could draw from?
Yeah, so kind of, think about where we're at in terms of the evolution of this generative AI technology. At this stage, most of us are interacting with the kind of like what I'll call it, all-purpose generative AI solution, a ChatGPT as the example. What we're also seeing being developed very rapidly are very specific applications, like, a generative AI application designed specifically to answer tax questions, or to analyze and assist with auditing standards in the execution of an audit engagement and so forth. So we're going to be seeing more and more of those. I don't know if I call them proprietary, but the more industry standard or industry-based applications for generative AI. And that's coming. It's coming very quickly. But I think going back to we're all starting on the same playing field, at the same level. That as CPAs, I think it's very important that we learn how to just use the all-purpose generative AI tools to get a sense of, how they work, what they can do, what they're capable of. And I was going to point out an example of like how I use ChatGPT in developing my presentations. So it gets back to the disclosure issue. So I do a presentation on cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. I did my first one back in December 14th. And because it was a really rapidly emerging technology, because it is a technology, that I was very interested in it, and I gave presentations on it. and now it's become more mainstream. And so earlier this year, the SEC approved Bitcoin ETFs. Okay, so I've learned about Bitcoin from the technology side of it. I didn't really know as much about the financial market side of it. So I didn't really know what an ETF was. Exchange traded fund. I know that now. But I went into ChatGPT. I said, explain to me at the 10th grade level, what is an exchange traded fund in the context of a cryptocurrency? So within 2 minutes, I've got a nice 2 or 3 page document that I can read, and I educated myself on what an ETF is as it relates to Bitcoin. So then when I go give a presentation on Bitcoin and talk about Bitcoin ETFs, I don't know, do I need to say where I learned that? I'm not actually using the content from it. I used it to educate myself, just like I watch a YouTube video. Hopefully some of you are watching this YouTube video to educate yourselves, right? Are you going to then say, do I need to tell my clients I watch these YouTubes with Gaynor and John? And that's why, you know what I mean? So those are the things we have to think about as far as how we actually are transparent in the use of this technology.
So I guess for today then, if a firm is looking to learn more about these generative AI tools, do you think they should just focus on kind of the, simple side of things, ChatGPT, learn about that? I mean, anything else, any other specific tools, like just as sort of the primer to the gateway into starting to think about how can I apply this in my firm? And then, from there, what would you do with them?
Yeah, so specifically which generative AI tool you use, and we'll talk more about them down the road in this series. I don't think it makes a big difference at this stage which one you choose to use. Maybe you're more of a Google office. I would use Google Gemini. ChatGPT is just got the name out there, so it has good recognition. It's very powerful. And then if you use Microsoft 365, then you're going to want to use Microsoft Copilot. It doesn't really matter at this stage. As time evolves, then yes, it will make a bigger difference. But just start to use it for very simple things. One of the best examples I like to point out to get started with it, if you have young kids or you have grandkids and you want to read them a bedtime story, well, you can just go to ChatGPT. I'll use ChatGPT as the example. And I can say, ChatGPT, write me a bedtime story for my grandchildren. Ryan is 3 and Nicole is 5. And Ryan's superhero is Superman. Nicole's superhero is Wonder Woman. And make it a 5-minute story and write them into the story. And in 2 minutes, I have a story that I can read to my grandkids that hasn't, baked into it. And you can tell it whatever you want to tell the story about, right? And so that's just one simple example. It's a good way to just kind of test it without doing anything that's business oriented as a starting point.
Very good. All right. So that's kind of a simple assignment, or maybe somebody wants to try writing their own tax plan or something like that and see what comes up and whether they would take that advice if it was them or not. So great. Well, thank you, John, and hopefully, just that overview of what generative, if I can say it, AI is and kind of what's coming down the road. I don't know if I want the like super intelligent accountants walking down my street. It sounds like Transformers right now, but in our next episode, we're going to talk more about the machine learning and some of those models and what do those mean and how can we use those, the large language learning models. And so stay tuned for that. And John, do you have anything else that will move the needle in this episode?
Again, just pick one of the applications and just start to use it. They're very simple to use, and just try some simple things. Don't put any private or confidential data. Just start to get your feet wet with it, and I think you'll be very impressed with what its capabilities are.
Yeah. Something else that you can do is use one of these applications, maybe to write an email to your clients about, end of the year tax planning. You could put that into Copilot or Gemini, any of those tools, ChatGPT, and come up with something that maybe you can tweak a little bit as well. So definitely a lot of different applications that you can, as John said, start to, test the waters a little bit as well and start to move the needle.
Okay, and then the next session, we're going to talk about, break down what an LLM is and actually how they're built.
That sounds great. Okay, we will see you there.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye.